Jamal and Philip were the most trusted knights in the feud, having protected Elena since she was a child. In his past life, it was believed they had been murdered while defending her, but now he knows the truth. He decides to follow them, curious about what will unfold. Jamal stops in front of a desolate spot in the slums, gesturing vaguely. "We've arrived," he announces. Elena glances around, unimpressed. "What is this place? There's nothing here. Are you seriously expecting a performance in a dump like this?" Jamal fidgets nervously. I think they're just not ready yet. They'll be here soon, I'm sure." He tries to keep calm, but his unease is obvious. Elena rolls her eyes. "Don't be ridiculous. Who in their right mind would perform in this filthy place?" Ghislain scans the surroundings, his eyes narrowing. At first glance, it might look like a deserted street, but the obstacles blocking the exits are no coincidence. They've prepared this in advance. Before Elena can respond, she grabs Jamal by the arm, dragging him. "We're leaving," she snaps, pulling him along without hesitation. Wait. Jamal protests, trying to slow her down. "You're already here. You should at least see the show." She scoffs. "I'm not staying in this disgusting place." Ghislain watches with mild amusement. "Do you lift weights or something? You're surprisingly strong." His comment only irritates her more. Just then, Philip steps in her path, blocking her escape with a sharp glare. "We should wait a little longer," he says in a low, firm voice. Elena freezes, unnerved by his sudden intensity. "Why are you both acting so strange today? What's going on?" Jamal, rubbing his hands together nervously, gives her an apologetic smile. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you. It's just, well, we received a special request." Elena narrows her eyes. A request. Before Jamal can explain, a man approaches from the shadows, flanked by two others. His name is Frank. He surveys the scene with a satisfied grin. "As expected, your work is flawless." Jamal nods eagerly. "Of course, we brought the young lady, just as promised. Let's settle things here." Frank's eyes then fall on Ghislain, and he frowns. "I didn't ask for him to be here." Elena, clearly frightened, glances between them as Jamal smirks darkly. "Don't worry, he followed us like an idiot, not realizing this place will be his grave." Ghislain glares at Jamal, calling him out. "You really think you can get away with selling us out?" Jamal laughs, unfazed. "Why aren't you worrying about yourself, Ghislain? All we have to do is disappear to some faraway land. We're sick of this miserable place anyway. And trust me, plenty of others are leaving Perdium too." His laughter drips with condescension. But before he can react, Ghislain's blade flashes through the air, slicing Jamal across the chest. Jamal's face twists in shock as blood spills from his mouth. Too late to realize what's happened. He crumples to the ground, his body splitting in two. Philip watches in horror, realizing they've made a terrible mistake. As Jamal's lifeless body hits the dirt, Ghislain mutters, "At least the barbarians never sold me out." He turns toward Philip, his mana swirling, and asks, "Do you agree?" Philip tightens his grip on Elena and curses Jamal. "Idiot. How does a knight lose to an amateur?" He barely has time to react before Ghislain's sword is embedded in his skull. "Impossible," Philip gasps with his final breath, collapsing lifeless next to Jamal. The henchmen exchange uneasy glances, one of them whispering, "Is that really the eldest son of Perdium? I thought he had no combat training." Frank, sizing Ghislain up, nods. "It's all right. Even though we were caught off guard, he killed 2 knights instantly, using mana with each strike." Elena clings to Ghislain, sobbing. "What is happening?" she cries. Ghislain glances at her, his mind racing. Realizing what he has to do, he leans close to her, whispering, "Take a little rest." As he knocks her out with a simple spell, "Does this rag smell funny? No jutsu." She falls into a deep sleep, and he gently lays her on the ground. Frank steps forward, amused. "Well, thanks for doing our work for us. You're not at all what we heard. We were going to take care of those 2 ourselves." He smirks. "Have you been hiding your true skills this whole time?" Ghislain shrugs. "Does it really matter?" He sizes up the situation. Frank is clearly powerful, but the 2 henchmen beside him, they're nothing. The real threat is Frank. Knowing he needs to finish this fast, Ghislain channels his mana, forming strings around his hand. "Who requested this?" Ghislain asks coldly. Frank grins. "Does a dead man really need to know?" Eileen, sensing Frank's stubbornness, smirks. "I knew you wouldn't give it up that easily." One of Frank's henchmen grins wickedly. Should we just cut his head off? Frank shakes his head. No, we need him alive. Break every limb. Make him suffer. He needs to writhe in agony for his shape to be truly beautiful. Now that's art. What a freak. Frank's men rush at Ghislain, weapons ready. Calmly, Ghislain pulls something from his belt, a simple candle. With a quick flick, he launches it into the air. It's a firecracker. I might be a little slow, but this should do the trick. The henchman hesitates, caught off guard for a split second. That's all Ghislain needs. In a blink, he pierces through the smoke and light, driving his sword straight between the man's eyes. The henchman falls dead, his body crumpling to the ground. The second henchman sneers. What a pathetic trick. He swings his blade at Ghislain. Ghislain effortlessly blocks the attack behind his back without even turning around. Then, with a swift motion, he wraps his arm around the man's sword, immobilizing him. Pivoting his hips, Ghislain pulls back and swings his own blade in a single fluid motion, beheading the man instantly. Before he can catch his breath, Ghislain senses an attack from above. Instinctively, he blocks it with his sword behind his back again, shocking Frank, who hadn't expected such precision. That was supposed to be a perfect sneak attack, Frank mutters, eyes wide. Ghislain pivots on his foot, his body spinning upward as he slices diagonally toward Frank. Frank narrowly avoids the lethal blow, but isn't quick enough to escape unscathed. His pipe is knocked from his mouth, and a thin cut appears on his neck. Frank stares down at the fallen pipe, then lunges with a fierce downward strike. Ghislain, now wielding two swords, blocks the attack just in time. Frank smirks, pressing down harder. I'm impressed. If you didn't have enough mana, I would have taken your head right there. Ghislain watches him carefully, thinking, how did he survive a strike to the neck? Maybe he reinforced it with mana to minimize the damage. Frank shakes his head, amused. No idea where you learned such strange swordsmanship at your age, but none of that matters. You're going to die here. His body glows as he begins to release a surge of mana, his blade crackling with power. Charging forward, Frank growls. You can't beat me with that feeble mana of yours. The sheer force of Frank's attack pushes Ghislain back, his grip tightening on his swords as he braces for the next blow. Frank laughs, wiping blood from his mouth. You're done. You'll die here. But Ghislain grins, and Frank's expression shifts to confusion. What are you smiling at? Frank demands. Without a word, Ghislain twists his body, deflecting Frank's sword with a sharp movement, driving his own blades into the ground for stability. Using the momentum, he launches a brutal kick right into Frank's face. The blow sends Frank stumbling backward, but he quickly regains his composure, sneering. I told you, that won't work with your weak mana. But suddenly, Frank doubles over, blood spilling from his mouth as he drops to one knee. His eyes widen in disbelief. What? What just happened? My defenses shouldn't be this weak against you. Ghislain calmly steps forward, his red mana crackling around him. You never expected to be found out, did you? The one behind Elena's death. It's been you all along. Frank's eyes narrow, his face a mixture of shock and anger. You? No. Ghislain doesn't give him a chance to respond, his voice cold. I'm done playing. He unleashes his third mana core, red energy swirling violently around him. Frank's jaw drops. How is your mana spiking like that? But Ghislain is already in his face, both blades in motion. Frank barely manages to block the first attack, stumbling as he tries to backpedal. Before he can catch his breath, Ghislain swings again, this time with even more force. Frank grits his teeth as he blocks the second strike, but the impact shakes his entire body. Ghislain presses on, his blades relentless. Each hit feels heavier, more devastating. Frank's hands tremble, his grip faltering. What? What kind of monster are you? He mutters, his voice cracking. My hands! They're going numb. Ghislain swings again, his strike heavier than the rest. Frank's sword cracks under the pressure, and a flicker of terror flashes across his face, visible in the reflection of Ghislain's blade. With a swift motion, Ghislain slices Frank across the chest, the wound deep and fatal. Frank stumbles back, gasping for breath, but it's too late. Ghislain moves in for the final blow, driving his blade straight through Frank's chest. Blood gushes from Frank's mouth, his body trembling in its final moments. Ghislain, his voice calm and controlled, presses his forearm against Frank's throat, pinning him to the wall. Before I finish you off, let's finish our conversation. Ghislain, twisting the blade in Frank's stomach, leans in and coldly asks, Who requested this? Frank, groaning in pain, pulls out a hidden blade, his voice shaky but defiant. I'm not going down that easily. I'll take Elena with me if I have to. With a flick of his wrist, he aims to throw the dagger, but before he can release it, mana strings wrap tightly around the weapon, stopping it midair. Ghislain smirks. That's exactly what I was waiting for. Frank's eyes widen in shock, realizing he's been outplayed from the start. The strings pull the dagger out of his hand, leaving him completely vulnerable. Ghislain continues, his tone sharp. Let's make a deal, Frank. No need for any useless words. Answer my questions, and maybe I'll sheath my blade. Frank, feeling the mana threads constricting him, grits his teeth. I can't move. These strings, when did you? He trails off as it dawns on him. You set this trap from the start, didn't you? You've been playing me the whole time. Ghislain, unfazed, presses harder. Someone of your level should know how to patch yourself up, but none of that will matter if I destroy your mana core. His blade begins to glow as his aura pours into it. Frank's face twists in terror as he feels a vibrating sensation deep in his stomach. His mana core starts to crack, the energy inside him beginning to scatter chaotically. You're insane, Frank shouts. One wrong move and the backflow of mana could cause an explosion. You'll blow this whole area to pieces. Are you trying to self-destruct? Ghislain's eyes narrow. Only the unskilled let it get that far. I can handle it. Frank realizes Ghislain isn't bluffing, he's truly in control. The fear of death reflects in Frank's eyes as he trembles, knowing there's no escape. All right, he screams. It was Count Desmond. He needed a reason to start a war against the Perdium and Degarda families. Ghislain pauses, the glow of his blade steady. Count Desmond, huh? It makes sense now. In my previous life, these dirty schemes were handled by families allied with the ducal house. So Duke Delphine is behind all this. Ghislain clenches his jaw, piecing everything together. That's why they wanted to kill Elena, he mutters, the realization settling in. Frank, panting and desperate, nods frantically. Yes, that's it. Now! You said you'd let me go. So, without a second thought, Ghislain drives the blade clean through Frank's stomach, his cold eyes never wavering. Frank gasps, choking on blood. W, what are you doing? You said you'd spare me. His voice fades as he slumps forward, life draining from his body. Ghislain, staring down at him, whispers, I never said I'd let you live. Ghislain looks down at Frank, his expression calm but dark. What's the matter? He asks, his voice laced with mockery. You've killed plenty in your time, Frank. But now that it's your turn, you're afraid? Frank chuckles weakly, blood dripping from his mouth. It won't matter, even if you kill me. The work for Degarda is already done. Do you really think anyone will listen to a punk like you? Perdium is finished. The war is coming, and there's nothing you can do. Ghislain places his hand on Frank's face, gripping it tightly. I've got something to tell you. His voice lowers, deadly serious. I died once, and I was reborn. This time, I'll make sure things turn out differently. Without hesitation, Ghislain twists his blade deeper into Frank's stomach, completely shattering his mana core. As the core breaks, a firework explodes in the sky, mirroring the destruction inside Frank's body. The shockwave of the mana collapse paints the walls with Frank's remains. Panting heavily, Ghislain surveys the aftermath, his eyes moving over the bodies scattered around him. He turns his head to check on Elena, relieved to see her still fast asleep. He exhales deeply, the tension finally releasing. Dropping his bloodied sword to the ground, Ghislain whispers, finally. It's over. But his relief is short-lived. He suddenly coughs up blood, falling to his knees, his body trembling, exploding 3 cores at once. That was easy back when I was the Mercenary King, he mutters, wiping blood from his mouth. But I won't go down like this. Summoning what strength he has left, Ghislain drags himself into a nearby house. He remembers something from his past life. When they found Elena's body, there was another, someone else. According to what Frank said about the Degarda family, there must be a clue here. Under a pile of debris, Ghislain uncovers 2 corpses, the son of the Degarda family and his escort knight. They had been murdered, likely silenced and framed for Elena's death. This was how they intended to spark the war. As the realization sinks in, Ghislain knows the war is inevitable if this evidence is found. I won't let it happen as they planned, he swears to himself. He pulls out the firecracker, using it to set the house ablaze, erasing all traces of the bodies and the evidence. Carrying Elena in his arms, Ghislain leaves the scene just as someone watches from the treetops, vanishing as silently as they appeared. The scene shifts to an unknown location where shadowy figures converse. One of them speaks, their voice low and displeased. It was a failure. We see the figure who had been watching from the treetops. They're reporting back to a group. We sent guard knights, as well as Frank, our best, but they couldn't handle one girl. Did they get careless, thinking it was easy work? The figure at the center leans forward, anger radiating from him. It's all Ghislain Perdium's fault, he asserts. The others exchange puzzled glances. How does that make sense? Ghislain is nothing but the useless bastard from the north. One scoffs, shaking his head. We all know he's a worthless piece of shit. Are you really trying to pin this on him? The central figure wipes sweat from his brow, nervousness creeping into his voice. No, you don't understand. He's completely different from the rumors and information we have. The brutality of his attacks. He slaughtered his enemies without wasting a single movement. It's like he was always one step ahead, like he was a completely different person. Another member interrupts, his voice dripping with skepticism. But we've already dealt with Degarda, so it shouldn't be a problem to start anew. The room erupts in anger, each voice louder than the last. You couldn't even gather intel on one kid? This is a massive setback, they shout in unison. Suddenly, a voice cuts through the chaos, commanding silence. All eyes turn to the throne at the end of the room. I will personally take care of Ghislain Perdium, the man seated there declares, a calm authority in his tone. When pressed about his plan, he replies, I'll orchestrate a duel. There's someone I have in mind. Curiosity ripples through the crowd. Who? They ask in unison. Cain Logas, he states confidently. He's renowned for his strength-based swordsmanship. Despite his youth, he embodies power, and I can assure you, no one in the north can rival him. A murmur of approval runs through the room. Plus, Cain is Ghislain's cousin, so their meeting won't seem forced at all. The man on the throne leans back, a glimmer of menace in his eyes. But if you fail again, there will be no next time. Your bloodline will end with you. The man nods fervently, assuring him, I won't disappoint you. Meanwhile, in the training hall, Fergus strides in, breaking the tense atmosphere. Ghislain, it's almost mealtime, he announces. As he speaks, a thread of aura zips past him, snatching Ghislain's sword from the wall. Ghislain's gaze sharpens, and the sword flies back toward him. He catches it effortlessly, exhaling with satisfaction. That should do, he murmurs, then notices Fergus watching. Fergus's eyes widen, clearly impressed. I can't help but notice how focused you are on your training. What was that just now? Ghislain looks down at his sword, still suspended in the air by the aura strings. I'm using mana like a string, he explains. In his past life, he wielded this technique effortlessly, but now his current skill level means he has to implode his core just to replicate that ability, thanks to his diminished mana reserves. Ghislain focuses, explaining that if he uses just one thread, he can conserve mana while still maintaining control. Fergus looks intrigued, saying he thought Ghislain had trained his mana for a long time, but he's never seen anything like this before. Just a little while ago, you weren't using mana at all, let alone training with it. How did you come up with an idea like this? Ghislain cuts Fergus off, curious. Did you need something? Fergus nods, a serious expression crossing his face. I just wanted to stop by to thank you for protecting the young lady. Why are you thanking me? That's something I should have done naturally. Now let's go eat, Ghislain replies. A few days later, the festival is on hold, and the tension is palpable. The young lady sits in her room, pouting. Why does everyone think I'm lying? Ghislain was the one who saved me. You should go tell them, she complains. Ghislain shrugs. It's fine. They won't believe him anyway. Belinda crosses her arms, frustration evident. I'm just mad that Jamal and Philip tried to get rid of me. They're perverts. Ghislain reassures her. They're just relieved you survived. I've managed to prevent the war for now, but I know they won't give up. I can't handle this alone forever. I need to build a military force. Just then, another friend enters, bringing food. Ghislain prepares to eat, musing that he has to get more involved in politics to achieve that goal. He glances down at the plate, his confusion growing. Why is there only a piece of bread? Are we only getting desserts? Belinda rolls her eyes. Surely you didn't forget the current situation? Suddenly, a loud voice calls out from the window, demanding compensation for the damages caused by the festival's cancellation. Ghislain peers out and sees a large group of villagers, their faces filled with anger as they demand justice, completely disregarding the guards trying to calm them down. What's going on out there? Ghislain wonders aloud, alarmed by the growing chaos. Belinda shakes her head knowingly. I knew this would happen. You know our county is filled with merchants who rely on the profits from the festival. Last year was good for them, but canceling the festival after just one day? It's no wonder they're upset. Ghislain frowns, realizing the implications. I didn't realize their situation was this dire. This isn't good. If we don't do something, they'll only get more aggressive. He turns to Fergus, urgency in his voice. What are the soldiers doing? We need to calm the crowd down. Fergus shifts uncomfortably. We don't have any soldiers available. Ghislain blinks, surprised. What do you mean? Most of them are dispatched to the monster forest for reconstruction after the orc raids, Fergus explains. Ghislain curses under his breath. Perdium is basically in a perpetual state of war with the northern barbarians. And now this? We have no money, no soldiers. This is a complete mess. He turns to Belinda. I need to have a private conversation with you. She raises an eyebrow, intrigued. What's on your mind? I need you to manage the funds and help calm down the merchants, he says, leaning forward. Belinda laughs lightly. You're out of luck. There isn't any money to manage. Ghislain looks incredulous. What do you mean there's no money? She crosses her arms, a smirk on her face. The Count cut off your allowance because you spend it like water. He rubs his temples in disbelief. I'm broke? Lend me some money. She shakes her head. I don't have any either. Ghislain slumps against the window frame, frustration mounting. Damn it, I have no money or soldiers. I've practically got nothing. With no funds, there's little I can do, even with my knowledge of the future. I need to figure out a way to get some money. Surely, there's something valuable on the estate. After a while, Ricardo bursts in, urgency written all over his face. Ghislain, you need to come quickly. There's a problem. Ghislain raises an eyebrow. What's going on? Young Master Cain wants to meet you, Ricardo replies, barely catching his breath. Surprised, Ghislain asks, Cain? Why is he here? They cut to Scoven, who's clearly been in a rough situation, bruised and battered. He gets hit squarely in the face again, followed by a follow-up blow to his armor, which leaves a significant dent. Scoven lands in front of Ghislain with a thud, blood spilling from his mouth as he cries out, Ghislain! Ghislain's expression darkens, a mix of anger and concern washing over him. Just then, Cain strides into view, towering over Scoven like a mountain. Ah, there you are, Cain says, a smug grin on his face. Scoven looks up at Cain, his eyes wide with fear and disbelief. Cain's imposing figure is enough to make anyone feel small, and with his serious cauliflower ear, it's clear he's no stranger to tough battles. Thank you for watching. I want to express my gratitude to those who have subscribed to my channel. I encourage you to support me by subscribing and joining to my channel, and I will be manhwa recap videos in every day. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to seeing you in the next installment.